Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Stress is caused when we don't feel in control of our life. Your normal routine is disrupted, you don't feel productive, you have no idea when the recovery from the disruption will appear. Resilience is a choice based on being prepared, adaptable, and optimistic. How can you prepare? What is holding you back from adapting? What can you control? And how can you maintain an optimistic outlook? Let's review those questions and more as Bill and I discuss mastering resilience and other fascinating topics on episode 561 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Well, this should be interesting. I'm not sure I'm always as resilient as I want to be. So,
I know I'm not.
Yeah, how do you bounce back from disasters sometimes? So
I carry my stress pretty closely.
I hold it dearly.
I do. It's not a choice I make consciously either.
Well, before we get into that, let's talk about our book club. Our book is What Great Salespeople Do. We're on chapter 10, The Storyable Organization. And they made up the word storyable because it's underlined in red on my script here. So, but I it's we're on the last two chapters of this. So, folks, pick up your copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's going to be our next book, the most famous, probably in one of the original self-help books ever.
Definitely.
On my top 10 list.
Yeah.
So the Storyable Organization talks about how members, departments, how we can use stories more broadly in an organization to help salespeople understand the value better and to be more interesting in the selling process. And if the organization doesn't tell stories, then the salespeople probably won't tell stories, right, Scott?
Yeah. I think this was the publisher of Selling Power, Gerhardt, said a great quote: "The CEOs are the chief storytellers." And when you mentioned that it makes it easier for salespeople to understand the story, it also makes it easier for prospects to understand the story. When salespeople, again, this is from past chapters, really appeal to the right side of the brain, the creative side of the brain, people are able to retain more information when you appeal to that side of the brain. So,
well, I think when we go back to Simon Sinek's selling the why, what is that? What is it?
Begin with why?
Begin with why.
Yeah,
and that's really what he's talking about, is why did we get into business? That's a CEO story, right? So that's part one, is the CEO's, the company story. And it's really why are we in this business? How did it happen? What made us feel we could be different from other companies that are doing similar things? And he uses the Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines story about sitting down and mapping it out on a napkin, their first route. I think there's always the FedEx story is a famous one that people know about sitting down and figuring out how to put everything going back to an Atlanta hub and a different way of moving packages. And so that's the broader story, right, of the organization. And does your organization have a story? Does it have something that says, here's why we got into business and here's what makes us different?
This is a very interesting part of the chapter. Southwest Airlines has been in the news a lot over the last couple of months. And this is an organization that Herb Kelleher sold it off to, I think, his CFO or some venture capitalist firm, and they stopped putting money into the organization. They stopped committing to customer service. They stopped committed to the planes and maintaining the planes and technology. And what happened one day?
They started the venture capitalists wanted their money back, right?
Yeah,
that's what always happens, and they lost their way, and it sounds like they've lost their story. And what they've really lost is the ability to have a computer system that works, which has really cost them a lot of money. And so we see also being penny wise and pound foolish in organizations.
So true. So true.
All right. Part two of this book, part two of this chapter, is about product marketers, product trainers. And we have dealt with this a lot, Scott. Boot camp. We go to boot camp and it's all about facts and figures and the 27 bullet point slides, and just memorize all this stuff about, our company and our product. And what they're saying in this is quit being so boring in your training, get some stories involved in your training. And then those stories then attach more effectively to the salesperson rather than facts and figures. And then they can tell those stories to their customers and make it come alive for the customers too. And I think that is also true. I have a story to tell myself. I did a lot of work with a med device company, new product they had coming out. We created a beautiful sales manual, and we had an interactive sales process with practice. We had scenarios that the salespeople were going to work through. And then every time we started to present it, the company cut the sales training down from 3 days to 2 days to 1 day.
Oh my.
We kept making cuts to it. And then we presented to the sales trainers, and you know what they said?
What?
Oh, can't we just do this on PowerPoint? Let's get rid of this manual and let's just go back. And they've converted the whole thing to a fact-based, boring PowerPoint slide. After all the work we did, the people that were most reluctant to try something new were the trainers. They said, let's just put this all back. We know how to train on PowerPoint. We don't know how to train interactively. So let's go back.
Yeah.
It was just, I just cried. I just thought you took everything that we worked on and you raped it into nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. There's a great line in this book, one of the salespeople saying, what am I going to do with all this information that just shoved my way? And it's so often that companies, information is different than influence. And too often companies deliver 100 slides with no idea what they're talking about and how they want the company to execute on them. This is why the left brain is overstimulated, and it sabotages the participation of the right brain. That's right out of the book. And I'd read that and I'm like, that is so true. You got to really engage salespeople to be able to visualize their product, their service, the application of their solutions to be able to get a greater return, a greater outlook, or a greater outcome for their prospects. And when they're able to tell that story and the prospect is able to see it in their right brain, it increases the chance of closing the sale. So true.
Well, what are these people throwing all these facts and slides around and thinking anybody's remembering any of this? It has no memorability at all. And by the time you got to the third product, you can't remember which fact and figure went with what product anyway. And so you can the whole load and you go into your customer and say, hey, tell me what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And have a discovery conversation.
Right.
It's crazy. All right. And part 3 was sales managers. He says, quit spending your sales meeting badgering the team about their sales funnel. And I had just had a conversation on Thursday of last week with a gentleman who called actually about the work that you and I are doing together, Scott.
Yeah.
And was requesting that I do the 7 deadly sins of selling for his company. He said, if I can get my sales manager to do it, because he spends most of his time yelling at us about what we're doing in our sales funnel and telling us how stupid we are.
God, I know. I did a program with a company, and about an hour into the program, one of the salespeople had a nervous breakdown in front of everybody else going, why are you here? Are we doing a bad job? I can't believe that they invited you in because we're screwing up. And it's like, no, that's not it at all. I mean, the management is happy with who's on the bus, and they believe there's more opportunities in the marketplace, and they want to convert those opportunities to sales by investing in the sales team to be able to increase the closing ratio, shorten sales cycle, maintain greater profitability.
I've run into this. Do salespeople think they're perfect? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how many times have we gone into a training and said, hey, I've seen all this stuff before. And of course, the question we ask is, how much of it are you using on a daily basis? So there's no real magic in selling. There's new ideas. This idea of story selling is a newer idea, maybe a newer idea that is going back to relationships. I thought it was really interesting. He talked about Phil Jackson and told the story of the Chicago Bulls and how, even though they had all the pieces in place, until they had a coach there that was able to get them to play together and play to their strengths by knowing the players, they weren't able to succeed. And Phil Jackson caused them to be able to succeed by bringing them together as a team. And that's what a sales manager, I think, is supposed to do too. Let's help our people maximize their strengths and go out into the marketplace and be better. But they're not perfect. and you should be continually training them. That's what when we did the book, The Sales Jiu-Jitsu, it really struck me. The authors of that talked about every week they're in there doing training. Every week they're doing practice sessions. Every week they're getting better. I just was at a speech by Matt Burke, the former center for the Vikings. He said the first thing, he said, I wasn't sure I could make it in the NFL, but the first thing we did for an hour every practice was the fundamentals. He said, I took 20 minutes, hiking the ball into the quarterback's hands, even though I've done it 1,000 times. And he said, the magic was when I got out on the field, every one of those fundamentals came into play and I did it automatically. And that's what sales training, all I could think of was sales training. You've got to learn to do things automatically. You can't have to think everything through or make it all up when you're in the middle of the sales call. Things have to happen automatically. And that's what sales training does for you. And if you never train yourself, if you never get better, you're not going to think of these stories. You're not going to think of things right. You're going to go back to what you do and start to tell them about the facts and figures, which is where we spend all our time with marketing learning.
Yeah. Great story.
So anyway, anything else you have on the storyable organization?
No, there's one line that I liked in the part 3 on the sales managers, and this was right out of the book. It says, "Why do so many top sellers make poor managers?" And the answer is they stop connecting with people and developing the kind of interpersonal relationships they were the foundation of the success in the field. And that's one of the goals of the sales manager, is to have interpersonal relationships with your sales team so that you're able to coach them up and you're able to communicate with them in a way that they're receiving the information because there's an established relationship there. And it's like you said, earlier about some sales managers barking at their sales team all the time. And that doesn't work. I mean, when you can really connect with somebody and you can motivate them and through intrinsic motivations versus extrinsic motivations, you're going to get a much more successful sales team. We need to keep that in mind.
Excellent. We're going to close it out on that point. Next week, our last chapter in What Great Salespeople Do, chapter 11, Continuing the Journey. So get ready for that. And then the book after, as I mentioned, will be How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read that every year. Love that book and almost have it memorized. So
wow, great.
Fun to be able to do that.
Looking forward to that. Our topic today is on mastering resilience. And I think that's something that we've all been tested over the last 3 years. And I think it's probably going to go to 4 or 5 years. This whole COVID thing really shut things down and caused people to really be resilient. And this topic
or not be resilient.
Well, yeah. And, and there's other ways of self-medicating to deal with that. But this really came about 3 years ago, Dr. Terry Wu. And I think we've had him on the show, and I'm a big fan of Terry Wu. He's a great guy. I mean, he said that during this COVID time, we don't have the control. So our stress level goes up. There is nothing that is predictable, and we do not feel like we're productive. And when he said that, it's like, bam, that is exactly it. I don't feel like I'm in control of my life. Nothing is predictable. No restaurants are open. I have to call to see if, they're open or they've got enough people. And, you don't feel productive. And when you want to feel productive, that's when you feel like you have a purpose. So I wrote, I got 5 steps, and they spell the word CREED, CREED. And I'll go through each one of them, Bill, and I'm curious on your input. So the first one is control. So, I really think about what are 4 questions that you can ask yourself is, what can I control? What options do I have? And these next 2 are very, very important. Am I creating options or am I picking options? And too often, we do not create options when we are moving through our lives and spending and trading our time within each day to be able to not feel like we don't have control because we're forced to accept something that we don't want. And that's exercising tolerance. And these days, it seems like we have to exercise a lot of tolerance. So have you ever been through that situation where you don't feel like you're in control, Bill?
Oh, I think that happens to us all the time. If we're in sales, we can't control how many people pick up the phone. We can't control always both ends of the conversation, no matter how much we practice. We can't control what the customer is going to do after the sale. Sometimes, they make promises about about what they're going to do, and those promises aren't kept. So it reminds me of a poster I saw once it was John Wayne in an old movie. He's climbing a cliff with, a rucksack full of rifles, and it says, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what life is about. We're out of control most of the time. How can we control the things, or find the things we can control, to give us that peace of mind that says, I'm moving things forward, even within all these things I can't control.
Right. The next one, the R, is resilience. So here we are. Do we have to comply, or are you facing adversity when you need to be resilient? And resilient is to be able to look at maybe a greater good, maybe to look at what's in it for you on a self-interest level. If you were to not comply, fight the battle, is there an emotional reason? What is your why to fight the battle? Exercise resilience, and to be able to prioritize what matters most in your life and what you have control over. And sometimes you just need to let it go. Sometimes I can really get caught up on a small service charge that somebody would add on to something. I mean, you go into the car dealership and you pick up your vehicle and you look at the bill, and all of a sudden they're charging you for shop supplies. Wait a minute, shop supplies? Well, I don't want to buy your screwdrivers and wrenches. The amount of money you're charging me at $205 an hour, I would think you would have your own tools that I don't have to subsidize your. I mean, when I work with a client, I never charge them for office supplies. Here's an invoice. It's 10% of the fee is for office supplies, because I want you to pay for my toner and my printer. That's not right. I mean, but we need to practice resilience. We need to calm down and not get so stressed out. And we know that when we don't feel like we're in control, our stress level goes up. And man, people are in a lot of stress these days.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I had a situation just yesterday. I was closing out with my internet provider. I had tried CenturyLink, and it just wasn't working out for me. So I called them to cancel, and I said, you can just prorate the rest of the month. He goes, we don't prorate the rest of the month. We're going to charge you for the whole month. And I said, well, that's fine. I just won't ever use you again.
They don't care.
If you're going to charge me for extra things, if I have problems with my new one, I just won't come back to you to try you again, because you don't prorate. And I said, I know this isn't your fault, but tell your management that to make, a couple extra bucks off of me at the end of the contract, I'm just going to choose never to use you again. And now here I am telling people not to use CenturyLink because they don't prorate. So how much did it cost them to do that? I don't know, but they made a decision. They made a decision, just like the business decision to add, $20 onto my bill for your shop rags. That's crazy
exactly.
stuff. So,
exactly.
but how do we fight? Sometimes we fight in different ways.
Right.
I'm not going to fight your prorate charge, but I can fight it in different ways by never using you again. So businesses make a lot of bad decisions. Customers will make bad decisions. What are you going to do? Sometimes I think it's just move on. We get so invested in the one phone call that we finally made that we get upset. Hey, if you made 100 phone calls, the one doesn't bother you. If you're making 2 phone calls, the bad one bothers you. So
That's
do
true.
a lot more work, and you don't have to be as resilient because you have a lot more customers in the pipeline.
Taking that to another level, Bill, it's the same thing with managing a pipeline. If salespeople are not getting new leads into the pipeline and they're keeping the leads that they have, most likely some of those leads are clogging up the pipeline. And you end up focusing on people that are not going to buy from you because you don't have any new leads. You have to disqualify some people and start getting some new people in your pipeline. But here's a couple of another points on resilience is if we're not practicing resilience, and we need to be resilient if we don't have to comply, we need to be resilient, and we need to be able to learn hopefulness. Otherwise, we start subscribing to learned hopelessness, which then can turn to learned helplessness when we want learned helpfulness. So the learned,
if the rest of you are as confused as I am, we'll just move forward.
It's helplessness and hopelessness that leads to depression. I mean, we need to be really conscious in this area right now because depression is the next step. And when depression starts to sink in, it's tough to pull out of that dive. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
change your lifestyle or take some medication. But, and if not, you get burned out. And we've dealt with a lot of burnout in people working in, this culture, this marketplace that we have. I was reading Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, and she talks about blown. She was working in a restaurant, and I've done this, and I know exactly what she's talking about. You get a station, and you are just absolutely overwhelmed, and you are just blown. It's just like, I can't move. And then everybody steps up, and they take the tickets. They look at, where the food is, any new downs in the station, and they really work on making sure that everything is continuing when a person is just absolutely blown. They just go, I can't take it anymore. And in some cases, I always ask them, what are you looking forward to? And they go, what do you mean? I go, what are you looking forward to? Do you have a vacation? Do you have a trip? Do you have something that you're looking forward to? And sometimes just having something to look forward to, it gives you enough hopefulness that you can arrive to that, look forward to that, and you can tolerate all of the adversity that you're facing in the meantime to be able to really exercise the resilience. So that's the resilience. That's the heart of the episode today. The next topic is evidence, asking yourself, what evidence do you have that you are not in control? And what specifically is causing the adversity? Get really up close and personal with the evidence. Too often we make things up. I mean, look at our self-talk. We worry about things that don't ever, 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 ever have a chance of happening. We worry about them.
And we worry about things that happened 20 and 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
I have a sibling that we were at my kind of sitting around talking during my father's funeral, and she was still talking about something that happened to her 40 years ago, 50 years ago, where he said something to her. And I'm like, he said a lot of stupid things to all of us, and so of us as parents. And if you sit and dwell on those things, you're just going to, what do they call it? Saw sawdust, right?
Right.
You just can't keep sawing that old stuff. It's gone. Let it go and move on. And sometimes we cause our own problems because we just can't let go, as you said, of something. Yeah. So yes, we can't, what we can't control, Scott? The past.
Right. That's so true.
The past is the past. And if we try to control the past, we're always going to be in trouble.
Oh, reconciliation is such a powerful activity, and it just requires humility and vulnerability to just practice reconciliation. But you have to be able to have something to look forward to or want something better than what you have right now in order to have reconciliation with what's affecting you and what in some cases you cannot control. The next, number 4, is the environment. So where is this adversity? Is it at home? Is it at work? Is it in a certain location? Road construction in Minnesota, it's that season. Different groups that you participate in, etc. So physically, where is the location, the environment that you're facing the adversity? And then what are the common areas of adversity? Is it the time of day? Is it the activity? Is it the personality of people that you're dealing with? The expectations of others? Maybe it's education level. Maybe you're at a higher education level and you get frustrated when you're dealing with somebody at a lower education level, or vice versa. Is it, within certain companies, Bill? I mean, you've talked about a company that you were having adversity with. And then sometimes it gets personal with family seniority. I come from a family of 10. It's a blended family. And talk about dynamics within a blended family. I think I've experienced almost all of it, but I don't even want to know what I haven't experienced because I just want to deal with what I've already been dealt with. But that is an environment that can create adversity and have a strong need for resilience. Like you said, with family stories at funerals about how people affected their lives and how others can feel like they're a victim of it. When we just have to be able to step up, go through the reconciliation process, forgive them, move on, and look for a better day and a better life. But that takes a lot of resilience that we have to practice.
Well, I think too, most of the time, the challenge comes because we can't leave that environment. So, we're not going to leave our family. We can't leave our jobs quite often. Although I have advised people, you're allowed to quit and find another job. I can't believe the number of people who put up with crap at work that they should just find this is a target-rich environment right now if you want to be employed. Yeah. And if you're sitting around getting abused by your employer, you have the freedom to leave that company. And so I certainly wouldn't advise you to leave your family. although sometimes, you need to resolve what's going on there. But
Yeah.
but how many times are we stepping into adversity, hanging around people that treat us poorly,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't need to hang around? Some of your old high school friends, by goodness, you ought to just leave them. They're stuck in high school and they're holding you back.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
some of your old college friends might be holding you back. So sometimes you have to break away from the old people, the old, as you say, the old activities, the old locations. How many things are you doing just out of habit that really aren't helping you, but they're actually hurting you, and they're a
Right.
negative environment?
Yeah. Yeah. I think forgiveness is the best way to win an argument. And you just surrender and go, let's put this behind us and move forward. And that can work in some cases. The last one, number 5, is the duration. How long will I have to tolerate this adversity? What does recovery look like? And what can I do in the meantime? And when we're really practicing a certain amount of endurance and tolerance and being able to know that everything that has a beginning has an ending, and we need to be able to tolerate what we can, and if not, go back to number 2, resilience, and figure out how can I be resilient and be hopeful, and to be able to also create different options. Like you said, Bill, when it comes to a job and an employment, is look at other options.
Mm-hmm.
Go out and just go on interviews. Even if you don't want to work for the company, just go out in an interview. You might look at what you have as going, it ain't so bad, because over here, this company, they'd work me harder. I'd have to get a lower pay rate, and I have to end up building up my vacation time in order for me to have what I have here. I mean, it's the same thing when you're buying a car. Go in and get in a brand new car and drive it around and go, yeah, I really love this. It's great. How much is this going to cost? Well, $624 a month. Oh, okay. Well, my current payment is $324 a month. Whoa.
Or I
This
actually
ain't
own
so
my
bad.
car. I already own my car. It's no payments.
Right. Yeah.
It reminds me of a story. It might even be in How to Win Friends, but the a guy decided he didn't like his house, and a couple decided they want to sell it, and so the real estate agent came in and started talking about all the benefits of the house and wrote up a description. When they read the description, they said, "Wait a minute, this is exactly what we want. Why are we trying to sell our house?" So they had to look at it through fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And sometimes we look at the things we have and we're mad about it because they're not good enough. And then, as you say, we look at the options, and the options aren't a whole lot better.
Yeah.
If you have a job, the company is going to pay you as little as they can to get the most work out of you. That's what their goal is, because the goal of a company is not to love you, it's to maximize profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
you're a cost. And
Yep.
if you haven't figured that out yet, that the company's job is not to love you and to keep you employed. I remember when President Obama came in, and I listened to a speech he did, and basically he said, "Why are companies keeping all this money when they could employ more people?" And I thought,
Huh.
well, that's a government solution right
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Let's just employ more people to create more jobs. That's not a job. That's not a company's job, and it's not
Yeah.
their job to make you love your life. The only
Right.
reason they try to make you love working there is so they don't have to hire somebody else and can continue to pay you whatever they pay you. So realize that you're responsible. And I think that's what this whole thing about resilience, Scott. You're
Yeah. Yeah.
responsible for you. Don't
Right.
look to other people to solve your problems. Don't look for other people to be better. It's the
Mm-hmm.
old one finger pointing out and three fingers pointing back.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to make your life better? Get in control. And when you can feel in control, then you
Mm.
don't have to worry so much about resilience.
Yeah, along that area, some people experience a lot of conflict in their lives, and how we perceive conflict and what our position and belief is on it is really affecting us emotionally and stress. I mean, conflict is information. That's what it is. How do we practice resilience within that information is really up to us, and we're in control of doing that. I want to close with a great quote from Susan Scott out of the book Fierce Conversations. And it's, whenever you're feeling anything other than curious, you are not in learning mode. And when you're caught off guard, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, are you being defensive or are you being curious? Are you being irritated or are you being curious? Are you feeling superior or are you feeling curious? And if we don't approach those situations of adversity and a need for resilience with a curiosity, exploring options, creating options, then we have an increased level of stress. And that's where, that can really sabotage us. Like if anybody's ever seen a tractor pull, you go through a day just like you're pulling the trailer on a tractor pull, and eventually that weight gets right up onto the back of the tractor and it just paralyzes it, just stops it dead in its track. And that's when you really feel blown and you can't go anymore. The weight of the world just came down on you so hard that you need to practice resilience. One last thing, I really want to reinforce and repeat a quote from our last guest, Floyd Carlson. The last episode, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, it's really, really, really worth listening to. He had a mentor that asked him about his career, and his mentor was really surprised that he was not advancing so much in rank because he was in the military as fast as other people were. And, his mentor says, what do you really want? And then the next question is, do you feel worthy? And Floyd said, the answer was no to both of those. And sometimes we answer those questions before we ever take on adversity. And we need to really get outside of our comfort zone. All the magic happens outside of our comfort zone. So think about, where are you most comfortable? And then how much time do you spend there? And when you get out your comfort zone, you need to deal with stuff that you do not have control over, but you need to be able to adapt accordingly. So I'll just add one last thing. As Socrates says, know thyself. And when you really think about who you are and how you're interacting with other people outside of your house, it's really where you can really play to your strengths. So know what you're really good at, concentrate on your strengths, and I think you're going to have a great day if you do that.
All right. So I do have, we want to talk about our resources that we have. I decided I've had a real good traction with this 7 Deadly Sins of Selling presentation. So I decided to open it up 2 more. So if 2 more organizations, companies want to contact me about doing a 45-minute presentation, again, I'll do it live in the Minneapolis area or a webcast if you're further away. So happy to do that.
Great option.
So as we finish up today, we have a golden nugget. This is by Andre Previn, who is a famous pianist. If I miss a day of practice, I know it. If I miss 2 days of practice, my manager knows it. If I miss 3 days of practice, my audience knows it.
Wow. So
and I think about salespeople, and they almost never practice. They practice on their customers. And
yes.
And I think it's really important for sales managers, sales leaders to start a regular practice session, whether it's weekly or monthly. Start putting them into scenarios where they need to practice and learn and get better so they quit practicing on $1 million deal.
Oh, so true. Great quote. Everything we talked about is going to be at winningatselling.com. This is episode 561. Please take a look at the show notes, share the episode with other people in your lives, your colleagues, customers, etc. Demonstrate your commitment to developing your sales skills. We're preaching to the choir, Bill. I mean, these listeners of ours are really practicing what we're sharing with them. It's the people that are not listening that should be listening. And unfortunately, when a skilled salesperson is talking with an unskilled salesperson, that's where we need to practice resilience at the same time.
Well, yeah, tell your friends about it and get them hooked on because you'll learn. Next week, our book club is finishing up What Great Salespeople Do with Chapter 11, continuing the journey. And the topic is, do I need a sales coach? Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.